Oh, there we go. Hopefully that's going to work. Hello, hi everyone, and thank you, Rob, for the really good, brilliant introduction as well. Um, I hope I don't disappoint. Hello and welcome. It's lovely to see you all, and it's lovely to see some familiar faces, especially those whose names I've seen and spoken to, but not necessarily met in person yet. So it's lovely to be in touch with you all. As Rob said, I've been doing all sorts of bits and pieces across the voluntary sector for the best part of 20 years, but really excited to be talking to you all today, and in particular, sort of thinking through the opportunities, especially for community interest companies and social enterprises. I think they are still considered a bit of a new thing that people don't necessarily understand yet fully. So it's really nice to be able to work with you all and hear a little bit about what you're all up to and doing as well. So I'm not going to bore you with PowerPoint, but I have got a few little slides that I will send round afterwards, or Rob can send round afterwards because he's got all your email addresses with a few bits of information in for you. So if I share, hopefully this is going to work. Can you all see that? If I make you bigger, because I'm working across two screens. So can you see the slide? Yeah, with all the logos on stuff. Excellent.
Yep.
So our session today is called Are You Funding Ready? So over the years, I've supported lots of organisations, including social enterprises, to think who will come to me and often say, I've got this really great idea. I'm going to set this thing up. And as part of that, to do what I want to do, I know that I'm going to need millions or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of pounds. But often they're not actually necessarily ready to actually access that money. So what we want to talk about today, we've got some bits and pieces so we can do some follow up with each of you today as well to see if there might be gaps, is make sure that all of you are funding ready, as well as talk about some top tips for funding, but also to kind of work through this opportunity, which is absolutely fantastic, to work with Christina and to work with a bid writer. So if I go to the next one, so our little agenda. So we've already ticked Rob off. I'm not sure we need to hear from him again this evening, so we'll keep him quiet in the background. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this sort of triage process that we've developed, and run through some of those sort of key things that you might need to have in your sort of bag of tools in order to be funding ready. And I've got some of my kind of top funding tips as well before I hand over to Christina, who's going to talk a little bit about this bid writing offer, what she does, the work that they do, and kind of some of her top tips before we open up to questions and things at the end. We're planning to close at 8, and we will finish at 8. But if anyone wants to have one-to-one kind of conversation at the end of the session, let us know. We're more than happy to kind of follow up with each of you. So hopefully that is the reason you are all here this evening. So, I mean, I'll sort of talk to this, but this is my sort of flower of how ideas might come to life. So I often have met organizations, and some of you, I'm sure you're all kind of at different stages of this in terms of your own ideas and your own thoughts and your own organizations. But it's really good to kind of first up identify your ideas. So what is it about your community? What gaps, what barriers, what assets are there that you might want to kind of turn into an idea for something you want to do? And you might have already started that. So it could be that you're running some informal coffee mornings, or you're doing a meetup in the park, or you're already doing something in a kind of natural space. But as that grows and as it builds, and as you realize maybe we need some funding for this, you have to start thinking about, well, how's it going to happen? What activities have we got? Are we making a difference? Do we need some funding? And that's the point at which is always good to think about, well, should we deliver this with a partner? Do we carry on as we are, or do we need to grow and kind of formalize our groups? So I'm sure some of you are probably already registered with Companies House or the Charity Commission, or both. Or it might be that you're kind of much smaller and working on a more informal level. the key thing, if you're going to be going after kind of grant funding in particular, is that there is a collective decision making element to your organisation. So that means that you would have at least 3 directors if you're a social enterprise, 3 trustees if you're a charity, that you have some kind of social purpose. It's really worth thinking as well at this point about your role, what your future role is going to be in the organisation, and your kind of structure. So thinking about your governance and what that's going to look like, because that will have a big impact on what you can apply for, what you can't, how you're going to function into the future. There's then sort of points to think about around compliance, and we'll talk about this a bit more as I go through, but really thinking through, have you got a governing document, a set of rules by which you make your decisions? What are you registered as? Have you got insurance in place? Have you got a bank account? Have you got policies? All of those things are really, really important. And you need to be able to show and prove those, particularly if you're going to be going for funding. And it's at that point that you want to be thinking too about what resources you might need. So you might have partners, you might have people you work with. You want to think about what key people might want to get involved or have an interest in the thing that you're doing. So that's when you need to be thinking about both your fundraising, but also sustainability. And I think with community interest companies, it's really important to think about yourselves as a trading model in the future as well. And even if you're a charity, you can still trade. So where's the money going to come from in the long term? You might need some seed funding to get you going, but where's this going in the longer term? Will you need volunteers? Will you need staff? How are you going to support them? Again, lots of things to think about in there as you grow. And then also, and I'm sure Christina will talk to this later as well, it's important to know and understand how you actually made a difference. So the term that gets used is monitoring and evaluation. So how will you know that you've learned from something? And then you've got the little learning at the top that goes back into your idea. And you're kind of constantly going through this cycle of learning, putting new ideas in, and keeping things going. So I think that's a bit of a whistle stop tour of some really complicated things that we could actually all, talk about each one for probably an hour in itself. But hopefully it gives you a bit of an overview of some of the things that you might want to be thinking about if you're trying to get an idea off the ground. So what we've done between Rob, Christina and I is we have set up an online form. So Rob, I don't know if you're still there or you've completely disappeared. But what we've done is we've created a Google form. So could you pop the link into the chat for me? So it's a little form. It's not a big scary form. You haven't got to write sentences in it, but it's really and it will just come back to Rob and I at this stage. But what we've done is I've called it a triage form. So if you turned up at A&E and you get triaged, they decide as you walk in whether you're going to need to see someone straight away or whether you can sit there for the rest of the day, or maybe we always end up sitting there for the rest of the day. But really, it's just to understand where you're at in terms of what things you've already got in place or what things you might need in place. The idea of the form is not to, pick you out and say, oh, you haven't got this. Why haven't you done that? And it might be that some of the things you don't necessarily need yet. But a lot of these things are fairly basic. So it would be really good if you can click on that link, go to that form. You can do it while I'm talking. It should only take you a couple of minutes to pop in your details and just tick the boxes of the things that you have. And if there is anything you haven't got, please don't worry. The idea is that as a result of this, we can create an action plan and we can look at that and then meet with you after if you wanted to, one to one. And Rob and I can say, actually, do you know what? This will be really helpful to you. That suite of support that Rob was talking about at the beginning of the session, we can then kind of say, this will be good, that'll be good. And it will be easier for us to kind of open and have that conversation. If there's something in that list that you're not particularly sure of, what it means, what it is that you need, write it in the little box underneath and we'll be able to have that conversation and have that little follow-up. So please, if you haven't already, click on the link. You can fill it in later if you want to, but really, if you can do it now, it gets it done, and we can kind of crack on. Hopefully that's all right for everybody. So So we've got the checklist and you're going to kind of click and go through. Don't worry about going to this link because actually I should have taken this out because Rob very kindly put it into the website. So please just use the link that's gone into the chat. But this QR code also takes you to the form as well. But using that checklist, I don't know, there's quite a few of us here. You might not all feel wholly comfortable in sharing whatever because we are recording the session as well. But if anyone wants to share some of the things that they think they need to improve on, it would be lovely if you can pop them in the chat and maybe I can kind of pick up on those. But if you wanted to, that would be really, really lovely. But if you don't, that's absolutely fine too. So while you're kind of doing that form, I'm going to kind of talk us through a little bit about going for grant funding, because I think that's kind of what we're all here to talk about today. But please remember that actually in getting a bid together, you're still pulling together the same information, just different levels of it, whether you're fundraising in all sorts of different ways. You never know when you might meet someone on the bus next to you, or you walk down the street and suddenly Bill Gates is there and he says, oh, I've got 50 grand I need to spend. And so it's always good to have your kind of pitch or your thing ready. And I think Christina's going to talk a little bit to that later. But, you know, this is going to be, I'm going to talk a little bit about grant funding and trusts and foundations. So hopefully you've all heard of them and you know what they are. Trusts and foundations are usually independent charities in their own right. Sometimes you get corporate foundations. So you've got, I don't know why Greg's foundation has come into my head, maybe because I'm super hungry at the moment. Or you might get ASDA Foundation. You get organisations like National Lottery, community funds that I'm sure you've all heard of, Heritage Lottery, Essex Community Foundation. There are literally hundreds of them. You can find out about them online. Some of them are really small and they just literally have a group of trustees that don't even have a website. Some of them are much larger with lots of staff, like the lottery. But usually it's really, I mean, I've only ever seen a fund once do it. Christina might have seen it once as well, but they generally won't be interested in funding any retrospective work. So things that you have already done, you wouldn't be able to get funding for. It's only that future facing stuff that you haven't started yet. They don't tend to like funding fundraising events or fundraisers, although there are kind of ways you can get around that. But generally, that is a thing that's quite difficult to put in there. Some won't like unsolicited applications. So some of them, they won't actually accept an application if you randomly just send it to them. So it's always worth making sure you've checked that and you've looked into that. One of the biggest things, and this has become more of a grey area, particularly in the last 10 years, when I first started working in the sector, it was really clear the government pay for this, the voluntary sector get funding for this. That has got greyer and greyer and greyer and greyer over the years. And I think particularly in areas like Thurrock, for instance, where the local authority's got a lot of financial challenges, but also here in Southend, where I'm sitting today, is that the thresholds have changed on what some local authorities will pay for and what some won't. So it's slightly different in different areas. And they do you end up with these weird gaps. But it is really important, I think, to be really clear on most trusts and foundations are not going to fund something that should be statutorily paid for. Whether the local authority are paying for it or not is a completely different discussion. But that is a really key thing to be thinking about. But what do they want to fund? This is the interesting bit, I think. They tend to be interested in new methods of tackling problems. So it might be an age-old problem. They quite like new ideas. It's always easier, I think, to get money in when you're the new kids on the block. It gets harder once you've been going for a little while. Usually interested in disadvantaged and minority groups which have inadequate access to services. So you might hear the phrase health inequalities used quite a lot. So those that, due to maybe social barriers, might be a disadvantage. Responses to new or recently discovered needs and problems. So again, that kind of new element is always of interest, although it's not impossible to get repeat funding or core funding, but it is getting harder. So I know Christina will talk about the importance of really making yourselves shine and stand out when applying. One-off purchases or projects are often Sometimes some funders prefer them. There used to be much less funding available for core costs. It's still a challenge, but those kind of projects or purchases can often be quite popular. Short and medium term work. So I think it's important to remember when you go for funding, most funding is going to be a year. You'll be lucky if you get 2, 3, 4, 5. I have seen projects funded for 10 years, but that's really unusual. So you've really got to think about how you can explain that within a year, this is the change that I'm going to make. So, like an environmental project is a really good example. So if your project is, I'm going to plant 100 trees, you're not going to reforest an area within a year unless they are incredibly fast growing trees. It's going to be a much long term thing. So actually, the benefit that you can deliver in a year is that you've planted these trees, maybe volunteers have got involved, maybe you've got school children there to help with it, you've built environmental knowledge and things in the area. So you do really need to think about what is it that I want to say and what difference can I make within that time period. So packaging your project. So Christina will talk to this as well a little bit. So I've said before that being good at kind of pitching your ideas and your project is a bit like being a really good estate agent. And I always think they'd probably be quite good at this kind of thing, is you might be selling essentially the same kind of thing. If you're selling a 3-bed standard family home, you might sell that to a family or a couple that are planning to start a family or people who've retired, but you're still selling the same thing. You're just pitching it in a slightly different way because you're going to different types of funders. But fundamentally, the key things you need to be able to talk about are, why is your thing important? Why is it needed? To have some evidence for that, what the difference is going to be, so the outcome. So, what's the project going to do to make a change in people's lives? And what is the thing you're going to do? And often I see that people know what they're going to do, but they're not so good at making sure that the reason for that and the outcome are as clear. That's often kind of a bit of a gap in that thinking. So something I can send round if it's useful to some of you, and I'm sure Christine's probably got her own tools and stuff for those that kind of get selected and for the sort of deeper support. But something I can share each of you is I've got kind of a handout sheet that you can see the framework of on the screen. So I always suggest that people think about who your beneficiary is going to be. So your community, what's life like for them, what are the barriers, what are the assets they have. That's the kind of why, really. The outcome. So next, thinking about what's the difference. And this box would usually mirror whatever you've put within, thinking about who your beneficiaries are. Before then thinking about the activity. So often people will skip straight to the activity bit or even to the resources bit, actually, because they say, oh, I need £100,000, but they can't really explain why. So I think it's worth, I will send this round if anyone's going to find it useful, but this is often the order in which I like to think about the development of something, the development of an idea before really sitting down and actually applying for any money. So before starting, if you're going to fill out an application, some really top tips that I have here for you. Have a look at what the application structure is. Is it an application form? Is it a letter? Some small trusts and foundations are still looking for a letter. Some ask for a proposal. They're all slightly different, so make sure you've had a look at that. Have a look at the deadline. And I have, on more than one occasion, spoken to people an hour, a few minutes, a half hour after a deadline, and they've done all the work, they've filled in the form, they just didn't get to click send or their computer crashed. And often it's still not accepted. So please make sure you've looked at your deadlines. Also, if you see a fund that has a deadline for tomorrow, so say the 2nd of October, honestly, unless you are ready, you've got all your stuff together, you know exactly what you're asking for, it's not always worth actually filling that in super, super quick. because actually you're right, something that's not great, you'll have spent time doing that, you'll have rushed it, you'll have stressed yourself out. It's really worth, and this is something I know Christina supports people to do, in creating that sort of calendar of, oh, I've seen this opportunity, I'm going to park it for now, I'm going to prioritize this one, I've got more time for this one. It's always worth really thinking through, what chance do you think you have before you slog your guts out. What amount will they fund? If they're only going to give you £500, don't ask for 5,000. That is something that people do quite regularly. What key phrases should you be using? Not phases, phrases, and there's a need to add an R in there. So often, if you look at the questions or you look at the website of the funder, you'll see that they're talking about things in a certain way. It's really nice sometimes to mirror back their language within what you're saying and how you're speaking about your work. Make sure that you've got your accompanying documents ready. So some of that list that I went through earlier, accounts, governing documents, I always think it's worth having it in an electronic file that you can access really quickly and straight away. So making sure also that if you're an organization, someone else knows how to get it. The number of times funders come back to you and say, oh, I need this by tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Someone's on holiday, they don't see it. So just make sure that you've got all that stuff ready to go. It makes it a bit easier. And you'll see that the big red letters say, and if I do this in person, I make people say it out loud, like we're in a pantomime, read the guidelines. The main reason that applications often get turned down is because someone didn't read the guidelines. So please always, always make sure that you have and that you do that. And I'm smiling because I too have been guilty of not reading the guidelines at times. And Christina's nodding as well, so she knows what that is and how that feels. So you've read your guidelines, you've gone through, you've got all your your house in order, you've got all your stuff ready to go. What are the key things that you need to be considering? So when you draft something, usually you're going to have to talk about who you are, so why you've set it up, what you're set up as, what your aims are as an organization. Again, that need or that evidence for the thing you want to do, what you're going to do, what difference that's going to make, how much money you're going to need, and how you've worked out how much money you need as well. It's very common, particularly when there's a letter application, for people not actually to put an amount that they're asking for. I think maybe we're being a bit polite, but actually, if you don't ask, they don't know and you don't get. And what fundraising you might have already done, what money you might have got from others, or that can really help too. I've put at the top in the white letters some kind of stylistic things. So making sure that you're credible, concise, and clear. One of the best bits of training I ever did in order to write bids, and I still remember it and think about it in my mind, was actually writing a press release. So, if you see the Echo or whatever newspaper for sale in a newsagent, they have the kind of A board out the front, and often it's like 3 words telling you the main thing about the story. Then, so that's your headline. You've then got the sentence in bold underneath that tells you a little bit more. And gradually, as you work down the article, the information is useful, but it gets less and less and less important. Or in terms of drawing you in to whatever it is you're trying to say, gets less and less and less, but it gradually draws the reader in. And I think that's one of the most useful tips I was ever given. I also had a boss that used to talk about empty words. So when you reread your stuff, if it doesn't particularly tell you anything and you've gone over your word limit, it's probably not needed. So you have to be a really good self-critic, I think, with some of this stuff. You want to be motivating and inspiring. If you can make a panel of trustees deciding where to send the money cry, that's always probably a good thing, particularly if you're trying to get their attention. And always, always remember that often, particularly if your idea or your organization has been set up by yourself because of a lived experience that you've had, you are also your own expert. Don't get too bogged down in academic research for national statistics, particularly if you're working locally. Those things might be useful, but just make sure that you're your own expert and really justify what's going on in your community, how you know that, and why you know that is equally as important as well. So places to look, and I think Christina will talk about this a little bit as well. I've just put a list there. There's lots of websites, lots of places you can look stuff up. Um, there are, places like CVS's and Talk to Rob as well that might have subscriptions to some of these sites where you can find out things. But to be honest, keeping a look online, talking to a bid writer, kind of networking, looking at other people's annual reports, they're all places that will give you a good idea of where you can find what funding might be out there. And so that brings me to my last bits, my top tips. So always do your research. I often say it takes more time to prepare to write a bid than it does to actually write it. That always happens with me. The more prepared you are, the better it's going to be. Read the guidelines, as I said before. Do not waffle. Now, the picture on the screen I thought were waffles. I've been reliably informed that that's actually a s'more since then, but I still really like the picture, so I've left it in there just to make us smile. Don't get disheartened or disappointed if you get turned down. Just a group I was working with got turned down for some funding today. But actually, what the process that has done is that there was an online form that was filled in. We got so far, so far, so far. We got to the last interview stage and they've turned it down. And actually, the reason why it's been turned down isn't that they didn't like the idea, they don't support it, which is what the individual thought. It's actually because there isn't actually long term, it was to try and get support with architectural costs of building a building. The money is not yet in place, or the finance is not yet in place to actually build it, which is a bit kind of chicken and egg, but the process has helped us learn exactly what support is needed, what we're going to need, and I've invited us to reapply next year when maybe the longer term finance piece is a bit clearer. But we wouldn't be where we are today if we haven't gone through the process. So there was still learnings and benefits of going through all of that. And also remember that maybe it wasn't the right funder for you. That's sometimes the case as well. And if you do get the money, make sure you celebrate, maybe by having a s'more or a glass of wine. Maybe if you don't get the money, you have a glass of wine as well. But please just remember, move on to the next one. Don't dwell on them too much. And that's me done. So, Christina, over to you if you'd like to.
Hello. Hello. Thanks, Gemma. That was great. And thanks, Rob, for inviting me to take part in this new project. And it's really exciting to see so many people logged in at 7:30 at night on a Tuesday in this local area. So give yourselves a pat on the back for doing this. So I'm gonna follow up from Gemma, and I'm going to tell you what the offer is, what our plan is, but also I'm going to try and give some insight from my perspective as a professional bid writer and how I have found working with organisations like yourselves over the last 4 years. And hopefully some of that insight will help you with your own plans and funding your own projects. I don't have any slides, so you just get to hear me talk basically. And I do have a bit of a cold that I've got from my toddler. So if I sound a little bit sniffly, then yeah, you know why. So yeah, my name's Christina. I run a company called Out of the Ashes. We're based in Wickford, but we help all different types of charitable organisations across England, where there's a small team of us. And my journey to starting this company was that during the pandemic, I decided to go freelance after a career of fundraising for charities as an employee. And I tried freelancing I really enjoyed it, and then I decided to form my own company doing it so I could get basically help more charities and social enterprises. I could get more credibility for myself. I could get insurances for myself. And my mission is to help and advise wherever I can to strengthen the sector. It's an absolute delight to be invited on this project specifically because I get to help so many of you in this room. So that's great. So I have always been a fundraiser. I started off as a community fundraiser, then I went into a marketing fundraiser, a corporate fundraiser, and then I started going into development. I've done some trading, so I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. But over the last 4 years, I've specialised in bid writing and from grants and trusts. So far, our company has nearly raised £1.4 million in the last 4 years for a wide range of causes. And I'm really grateful for the experience. I've worked with so many different types of organisations. It's given me a fantastic insight. Um, so the type of charities that I have on my books at the moment, I've got lots of different causes. There's a youth charity for homelessness. There's an animal rescue shelter. There's a perinatal mental health social enterprise, a swimming club, CIC in London, um, and a relationship counselling charity. And that's the handful of organisations that I'm working with at the moment. They're wide ranging in size. So I have some where there's a part-time chief officer and just volunteers, and the chief officer is juggling everything. I'm sure a few of you here will might relate to that. And then I helped so the animal welfare charity, for instance, they have lots of departments and a fundraising team of 6 members. So very broad ranging organizations that I help. And these organizations have brought me in for various different reasons. But a lot of time it's just to advise and add capacity where they can't or are unable to do that at that time. So some of the projects are looking for core funding specifically, so unrestricted money that they need money coming in for cash flow, but they don't want it tied to any particular project. One of the organisations, they specifically want us working on capital items such as vehicles and CCTV and equipment that they wouldn't be able to afford, but would give them lots of benefits. Solar panels, wind turbines, items that might reduce or overheads. So there's that, and then there's projects. So helping people, service users, wide range of projects, and really the I'm not the expert. My company's not the expert. It's you guys that are the experts. All the charities I work with, they are the experts, and all I'm doing is coming in and helping pull out your expertise and putting it on paper and guiding you to help you build the best possible business case that you can for your causes. The funding landscape at the moment is very competitive. I've personally not seen it this competitive before. We've gone through a lot of challenges as a sector. We've gone through the pandemic. We're going through a cost of living crisis. So it's really critical that the organizations like yourself can get your cases down on paper in the best possible way. So I've been working with Bases and Rob and Gemma, and we've come up with a plan where we will provide some free services to a selection of your organizations, and that will involve helping you shape your project so it is more attractive to funders, finding some eligible and appropriate funding opportunities for you, and helping you build that case for support. It's about 3 or 4 days work for each selected organisation. And it's a really good opportunity to work with somebody externally to help really flesh out your ideas and your pitch. So um, I our company has been said that we're very good challengers. So when I will work with one of you at a time, I will really try and ask the challenging questions that a funder might ask of your project. And sometimes it's an area that might be a bit daunting because I might say, well, why are you doing it that way? Have you considered this way? Because I'm trying to find holes and I'm trying to find weaknesses in your applications so that we can strengthen it before you go to an application panel. So a big part of the process will be me asking difficult questions and then helping you come up with answers and solutions of how you would get around that. One of the big areas of that we will focus on is scrutinizing your sustainability plan as Gemma mentioned before. How are you going to fund the project after you've received this funding afterwards? How are you going to move your service users on to another service after, so they don't have a gap in provision and they're not left on as Gemma called it earlier, a cliff edge, which is such a vital consideration. And this is the level that the funders want to hear about. Um, so once I've spent some time with you fleshing out your idea and really challenging and stretching your thinking, then I will actively go and look for funding opportunities for you. There's three different levels of this. The first is, as Gemma said, you can go out. There's lots of free resources. Your local CVS centres might even help supply some funding opportunities for you as well. There's a website called Charity Excellence. Don't know if many of you have heard of that, but you can sign up to bulletins where you can get funding opportunities for free in your inbox. And what I will do myself is I will identify opportunities based on, will they fund your cause? Will they fund the type of legal structure you have as your organization? Will they fund the area that you operate in? And will they fund an organization of your income size? So that's the first level. Then the second level I will look at is, have they funded you before? Because you're more likely to get funding from somebody who's funded you before than a new funder. So that's the next area. And then I'll do some deeper research to see whether there might be any exclusions that might apply to you or any other reasons that you might not be eligible. And then the third level that I will do and look at is I will work with you to evaluate, is it the right opportunity to go to at this time? Is there a better use for that fund in your organization rather than the project you're thinking of applying for? And it's a much deeper conversation that I'll have with you. And the ultimate goal is that we will create a little calendar for you. So you've got something to take away with you of a list of funders and when to apply for them. So it's a lot more manageable and it doesn't seem as daunting. Um, and then we will work together on getting your business pitch, or we like to call it case for support, on paper. Now, the point of this document is it's only about 4 pages long, but the point of it is to get your application past, I call them the gatekeepers, the person who opens the post and the person who monitors the email inbox. So when you've got somebody who's opening 400 letters, or they've got an inbox of 1,000. I mean, the Henry Smith charity recently had a 3,000% increase in applicants. So somebody or a team is going to be opening them, and our job is to just get past them. Because if you can get past them, usually you've either got stage 2 or you're opened up to a telephone interview or a Zoom interview. So we've just got to get your message past that first thing, past that first gate. So typically, we will look at local statistics, how your project is meeting local need. We'll try and find lots of, if we can, government statistics backing your work or your need or your evidence. We will look at, we'll put in your track record if you've got a track record, and we will really sell your mission and vision. Um, we will focus heavily on the need for your project and how your solution is the right one. So long gone are the days where we can just, I myself can decide the solution for a group of people. Now, those people have to create the solution for a project, and you need to evidence that they've come up with the solution, not you. So there's a lot of co-production in there. We will work on finding ways to evidence that your service users have chosen that this is the best method to try. And then we will try and weave into this some case studies, some testimonies, and then we will work heavily on the budget section at the end to convey to the funder that the money they are giving is being spent in the right way and on the right activities to achieve a certain outcome. And this information, it's once you've created this document, so you will have it to take away with you. You can then use that you can copy and paste sections onto your website. You can create leaflets from it. You can update your annual reports. You can put it in staff or volunteer handbooks. You can do whatever you want, knowing that you've got a consistent document that you can then take forward that is the best possible business pitch that you could get at this moment in time. Now I the reason why we're focusing on the getting are you ready to apply for funding and getting bid ready is because from my experience, and I have this a lot, where somebody will come forward and say, yeah, we want to go forward for this project. Here's the bid, here's the deadline, this is what we're going to be working on. And we'll work really hard. We'll get everything together ready for the deadline, only to find out that simple pitfalls, they're not ready. So one could be that the funder wants a safeguarding policy and that the organisation um theirs expired 3 months ago. And now suddenly they have to pull together all of their board or trustees and review the safeguarding policy and update it in about 24 hours turnaround. And that this is what we're trying to prevent, but by doing this webinar is preempting those common pitfalls so they don't become a problem and we can get these applications out the door. Other things that are typical areas to trip up on is financial processes. I've had it before where the financial policy hasn't included authorising expenditure or having enough signatories on the bank account. And so that's the purpose of, well, it would be fantastic for you and a really good exercise if you fill out that form that Gemma and Rob created, and then you can get yourself into the position to know that you've got everything ready. I'm aware of the time. I've got 1 minute left. So I'm going to try and speed up just for some last minute top tips. Start creating a spreadsheet that's got really common questions like your name, your address, your postcode, with the date you started, the names of your directors, trustees, because you can just go back to that one place and get all the answers and build that spreadsheet up over time. Another tip is if you start filling out application forms, it's really useful to copy and paste all the questions into a Word document before, and then you can share that with your colleagues and you can actually create the bid collectively. I find that the documents The bids that's had the most team members involved are the ones that are more likely to win. Bid writing is a team effort within your organization, not a solo endeavor. If you want to really get success, answer the question. It's amazing how many people don't answer the question in the right way. If the funder wants, the difference the project will make, don't put your mission and vision statement in that section. It's very easy how it's amazing how commonly that happens. Be proud and have confidence of your experience of running your projects. You are the experts. Um, as Gemma said, get used to rejection, see it as a positive, because going through every rejection makes you stronger and it will make your business pitches stronger. And the last thing as well is about AI. A lot of more and more people are using AI. AI is useful and it has a place and it can help you with bid writing. However, it is obvious when something is written by AI. It's very, very obvious from a funder. So if you're going to use it to get ideas and to get structure, but don't present the final thing as written by AI. And that's it. I've overrun by 2 minutes. But yeah, I hope you found what I said useful, and I'll hand you back to Gemma. Thanks.
No, that's brilliant. I was nodding away. The AI thing, the Charity Excellence website, actually, I put the link in the chat, is really, really useful. And there is a bid writing AI tool on there. But again, having been the other side of receiving those applications, you can tell because they're all the same. So it doesn't quite do it for you. So we still have our jobs for the time being. We've got literally 3 minutes. The key thing that I wanted to kind of summarize at the end is that if you are interested in receiving some of that sort of one-to-one support, please fill in that triage form. The link is in the chat, and I'm sure Rob will send it around as well with any follow-up. If you are interested in having the opportunity to be put forward to have some bid work done for you, the deadline to send in your idea is the 21st of October. So Rob will kind of put that in the follow-up email as well. And Rob, you'll send the link. We've done a separate Google form. Again, it's fairly simple and straightforward. And if you don't know all the detail, don't worry, it's just coming into the three of us. What we're then going to do is sort of look through those on the 21st and sort of when you've sent them in. And then we're going to arrange some informal chats with the ones that we think would be good to be taken forward, because we know sometimes it's easier to talk about the thing that you want to do rather than write it down. And then we'll be getting in touch with the 5 that will be supported, hopefully during kind of November, but definitely, hopefully, with some bids submitted before the end of the year. In the meantime, if you can fill in that triage form again, ideally by the 21st of October, particularly if you're going for that bid writing opportunity as well, that would be really, really useful to kind of understand and see where you're at. If you haven't got loads of the things on the list, doesn't necessarily mean that we'll turn you down for that bid writing opportunity, but it means that we have an idea of just how much support you might be needing and where you're at as an organisation. Which has taken me to almost the final minute of our session. If anyone's got any kind of burning questions about the process, about what we've been talking about, please feel free to maybe pop them in the chat with your email address, and I will follow up with you after the session. But Rob, is there anything else that you wanted to just highlight or add in before we finish?
No, just to say that we will be following this up. All the attendees will receive an email with a summary of everything that's happened tonight, including the links and your handouts as well that you sort of promised earlier on, so that people have got everything, and the deadlines will be displayed as well, so that so there'll be 2 forms that ultimately you've got to fill in order to get our support. and we'll have that strict deadline, and then we'll be in touch after that. So that only leaves me to say thank you, massive thank you to Gemma and Christina for bringing all your expertise and your knowledge to this. I hope you found it helpful. We're not going anywhere. We're we're here to support you and help you, even if you're out of towners. It's fine, get in touch with us. We can point you in the right direction. We can maybe find you some friends local to you as well. And, we're here to support the sector in whatever way that we can while we can.
Brilliant, thank you. I look forward to seeing the forms and all your brilliant ideas coming through. But please, please, please don't worry if it's just an idea. It's the people who have the determination, the spirit, and the ambition that always get there.
Thank you, everyone.
And we've got just one last thing. I think I might as well do a shameless plug, mightn't I? We've been running in-person workshops every other Wednesday. So we have one in 8 days' time on the 9th, and this one is about I think it's about becoming a financial ninja, how to do management accounts and reporting and being aware of your financial situation in your organization, all that kind of stuff, delivered by a qualified accountant, one of our co-directors, Claire. So yeah, if you want to, I shall also include the overview of all of our events, training events, for you as well. Some of you may well have seen that link already. Please have a look at it. So I know Andy has been to our training, as has Lindsay, and I think you both valued it, haven't you? And a little review feedback.
Yeah, it's been really good. Thank you.
That's great. Right, that's it then. That's us finished, and 2 minutes past 8. Perfect.
Brilliant. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Hey, thanks.
Bye.